I was going to do a video on the 4xCCU setup mode, but I thought I might, before we do that, I'm going to tell you about the SuperScope, which is a Blackmagic product like that. It's a SuperScope up there. You can see you can put picture on either side and any kind of a waveform vector scope, any technical monitoring up on the either side as well. So we can control all that. You might notice that we've got a red border around this one here. This is because the 4xCCU controller has built-in tallies, as you can see, as selected on the ATEM. And what it does is that if any of the cameras allocated to the 4xCCU controller is on air, as can be seen by here and the 4 different tally lights, if any of those 4 are on air, it will tell the SmartScope to put a red border around, and you can actually tell it which particular monitor you want it on in the setup mode. And the same applies to the preview row. If we come down here to, if I take the camera off, any program off, and just put a preview camera on, you can see the preview lights will show you here on the selected cameras. And again, if any of those preview lights are on, it brings a tally around. Select the camera with a picture on it. So there's a program, and I can then say do an auto off, and you'll see the program then goes to preview, and vice versa. So that's just a little trick you can do with the border around the SmartScopes to give you a tally indication. And so we're just going to quickly go in and just going to show you the setup mode for the SmartScope. And the way you go into setup mode is that you just, there's a little button on the side here, shift button. You just hold your finger on there for about 4 seconds, and when you get into setup mode, which I'm going to be explaining about in another video, you see all the LEDs flash, and that's a cyan color. Now, because this unit doesn't have a display like the full-blown version, it's very hard to give user feedback to what mode you're in and what you're adjusting and all that. So it's based on what you can see. And with the SmartScope, you've got to, when you're doing adjustments, you're basically looking at what you can see on the SmartScope to know what you're adjusting. But it also evolves these LEDs changing color. So as I say, you can see them flashing blue, cyan. So we know that all 4 flashing, we are in setup mode. And in setup mode, you push any one of the 8 buttons, which is the 4 at the front, the 4 at the back, will put you into a different mode. And those modes, if you look at the user guide, if I just scroll back down here again, you'll see there are the modes. And we're actually interested in this number 8, which is pushing the pedestal 4 button, will put us into the SuperScope settings. Once we're in those settings, the LED will change color, as you will see. And it's based on the fact that the red LED indicates that we're using the left monitor, and the green LED will indicate we're using the right monitor, or adjusting the right monitor. And then while it's flashing, you'll see here, if it's on red and it's flashing blue, then we're adjusting the display type. The display type is whether you're on a waveform, a vector, a picture, audio, whatever. And then when you're doing the brightness, it's yellow, contrast is cyan, saturation and magenta. And this is while it's flashing red as well. And then when you want to select which audio channel you want to monitor on the right hand side onto the audio display, it'll flash, in this case, red and black for the left monitor and green and black for the right monitor. So, as I said, to go into SmartScope setup, what we need to do is we need to push the pedestal button here. As soon as I push that button, all these other LEDs will stop flashing. And you'll see now, if I can get this into exposed properly, that's actually flashing between red and yellow. And the reason it's flashing red and yellow is because the last time I was in doing a SuperScope setup SmartScope setup, I was actually adjusting the red and yellow flashing, which is brightness, and as you can see on the terminal, it'll tell you it's actually doing the brightness, and it's yellow, just indicating that's what the colour it is. It's also on the terminal window showing you the current value. 0 is the default mid value, so as you turn the knob you can wind it down and wind it up. Now the other thing that this will do, when you're doing any adjustments in the SmartScope, it puts a white border around which monitor you're adjusting, and it only lasts for about 15 seconds, which is all part of the SmartScope software. And if I just turn the knob to select another value, you'll see it'll re-establish the white border, just so that you know that whatever adjustment you're doing to the monitor with the white border. And if I keep turning the knob, you'll see now it'll go over to the right monitor, which means that any adjustments we do on the panel here will be on the right. And you can see the LEDs now flashing between green and blue. So that means that we're actually on the second. Green always means the second, and the blue means, in this case, blue means we're doing the display type. So if while we're in display type, well, I can select whatever mode I want by just rotating the pedestal knob, and then we can rotate the iris knob for that position, and it'll give us the variations of the display. And as you can see up here at the moment, it's on Parade RGB, but you don't need to read what it says up there, because just by looking at the monitor you can see it's on Parade RGB. So I can actually turn the knob and it goes to, that's Parade whatever it is, YUV, histogram, audio DBS, and audio DBVU. And then as we go the other way around, we can then go and select, so that's where we were. We can go one back. That puts us into Vector 75, Vector 100, and there's picture mode, and there's just waveform. You notice that you probably haven't seen it, but because this is not timing out, it's keeping the white border up. But if I don't turn any knob, after about 15 seconds that will then disappear. There you go, I haven't done anything and it's just gone. And then if I then rotate the selection back one, you'll see right now it's flashing green blue. If I go back one, it now steps back to the first monitor. So these five modes, which are display type, brightness, contrast, saturation and audio, are repeated again for the second monitor and the first. So we're now back up into the red. So if you remember, I find it quite easy to remember the colours, because I know magenta's a bright colour, so that would be saturation. Just to rotate all the way back to the beginning here, and now we're at the very left hand side is the left monitor type, display type. And if I just go down to you can see up here, it'll tell you up here on the screen as well. Later on, when the little optional display unit is available, you'll be able to see all that on the little 3.5-inch display as well. So when you so let's just go into say contrast mode. As I turn the iris knob up and down, it's increasing and decreasing. So 0 is always the default position, and as I continue turning down, it goes into minus values. And at any time, if you push the iris button down, it will put it back to default. So if you get lost, you can just hit the button and put it back to default value. If you hold your finger on the down on the ped button and turn the iris knob, it increments in 10 at a time. You can see it's incrementing 10 at a time. And if we go and have a look at the monitor here, you probably can't see because it's rather subtle, but but that's actually winding it, cranking it all the way up. and if I just hold my finger down on the iris button, it resets it there back to normal. And just as another little feature, if you go over to the saturation mode, which is here, magenta, and you can see the LEDs flashing red and magenta. You can see better if it reflects off my finger. There you go, red and magenta. It doesn't look like that in real life, it's just that this phone that I'm using is overexposing everything. So again, I can turn the value up and you'll see the value changing on the monitor. Now at any time I can then just push the iris button and reset it back to normal, which is there. Now here's a little trick with you can do with the saturation, is that if it is defaulted back to 0 and you hit the reset again, it actually resets it to 0 chroma. So with just a push of a button you can turn your monitor to monochrome, as you can see there, because some people need to or like to look at stuff in monochrome as well. And then of course while I'm down to the bare minimum, I can hit the button again and it'll put it back to default. And I hit the button again and put it down to 0, hit the button again and put it back to default. So that's another little nicety that I've found useful. And so that's just about it. But it did require a little bit of extra explanation. So I hope you enjoy.